and welcome to my channel. My name is Rachel. If this is your first time here, welcome. And if it's not your first time here, thanks for coming back. So today, I am going to be doing my most favorite video to film, which is my monthly palette ranking. This is basically a way to give you some speed reviews on some palettes that I've been testing, and I have used these palettes enough to get my final thoughts on them. I'm gonna link all of the palettes down below in the description box, as well as everything that I'm wearing on my face today. So if you have any questions, check the description box. Now, I do wanna go into this saying these are ranked on my preference. So if the bottom palettes are your absolute favorite palettes, it is not a personal dig to you at all whatsoever. We just might have different preferences, different things we're looking for in eyeshadow palettes, and I always explain why I like or dislike something about a palette, and that may let you know why you may like or dislike the palette yourself. I have 8 palettes to talk about today, so I will say none of these palettes are bad palettes at all. And this was quite a hard ranking for me, actually, to be quite honest with you. I kind of knew it was going to be at the very end, but everything else was a little bit harder to rank. So these are all good palettes. I do recommend all of them, actually. It's just a matter of what one I'm drawn to more over the other. Starting with number 8, I have the Joa Beauty Escape palette in the colorway Amazonian. This is a really nice little tiny 6-pan neutral eyeshadow palette. And it's even a warm neutral eyeshadow palette, which I love. I'm never gonna say no to that. I did a full face of Joa Beauty, which I will link that video down below. And this is one of the palettes that I picked up. I believe I picked it up in store at CVS, but they do sell this palette on their website, and it does also come in several different colorways. So if you don't like a warm neutral palette, there are other options. I think the quality of these shadows is pretty good, especially for a drugstore palette. I think they're pretty darn good. Like, if you are in the drugstore and you see Joa Beauty and you see one of their palettes and you want to pick them up, I would recommend them. Now, are they the best eyeshadows in the world? No, they're not even the best ones of the ones that I've tried this month, but I think that they're good for the drugstore. I think they're up there with Wet n Wild, which I think Wet n Wild, generally speaking, has good eyeshadows, pretty up there in terms of drugstore quality. The shimmers actually pick up better with a brush, which I don't really say very often. I 99% of the time apply my shimmers with my finger, but these ones are so finely milled that when I slip my finger across them, they just don't really pick up onto my finger. And they're not like sparkly, they're not super metallic. They're more of that like sheen, a little bit more satiny, which this is a Korean beauty brand, and someone did point that out in the comments of the video that I did, saying these are maybe more K-beauty inspired, where it's a little more of a subtle color to them. The mattes are really good, actually. I have no complaints. There is one satin shade, which I wish was a little more pigmented, because I did use this for my inner corner when I was using this, and I don't feel like it really brightened up my inner corner that much, but overall, I think it's a good palette and a good drugstore little 6-pan neutral palette if you were looking for one. Coming in at number 7, I have the Aurora Struck palette from ColourPop. So when I first saw them show this online, I was so excited because I think this is a gorgeous color story, especially for ColourPop. They're getting out there with a mega palette. They're not doing something neutral. They're doing something a little bit different. Now, I am a neutral girl at heart. I really love neutrals. And this color story, the 3 of these palettes that are coming in at 765. They're a little bit higher in the ranking just because of their color stories. But with that being said, I like that they did something different. I think the packaging and the cover is so beautiful, and the color story inside really does reflect that. So I was really excited for them to do something a little different. Now, I think the mattes in this are really nice. I think they're good. I've heard different reviews saying that some people had a hard time with the mattes. I didn't have a hard time with these mattes at all. I do wish that they had like a deep purple matte. This one is like a purplish brown, but I wanted something like actually purple, because there are a lot of purpley tones in here, and I was kind of wanting to reach for a dark purple. Like if this metallic down here was a matte, I think that would have brought something different to it. And I think a lot of the gray mattes, they look pretty similar on the eyes. I don't think we needed like 7 of them, you know? So I feel like they could have done a little bit better with the variety, especially because there's so many shades. I don't know. I think they could have done a little bit better. And then the shimmers, I think some of the shimmers are really nice, and I think some of them are Not in my preference. Now, I do appreciate that they're putting different textures in here, like they're not all the same type of formula, and that would pose a problem if you didn't like that formula. You'd be stuck with a palette full of that formula. Did that make sense at all? I hope so. I just like variety. Variety is the spice of life, okay? That is one of my life mottos. I really like the shade Head North. It's super beautiful, bright, shiny, like gorgeous white, like creamy white for the inner corner. I'm so glad that they put this in there. And then my other favorite from the palette, which I did use in my 2 looks, I did a 2 looks video with this. I can link that down below. This one, High Latitude, the silver. Beautiful. Absolutely stunning, super metallic, super foiled. That's my preference typically. Like I really like that formula. And then some of the metallics, I don't know. I felt like they weren't really just in my preference, I guess. There are 2 up here that are kind of pressed glitters. I think they're trying to make them eye safe, but they weren't really impactful enough. Like I don't feel like they really did much of anything when I put them on my lid. They're like kind of dry and scratchy. And then some of these other metallics are like satiny metallics. I don't know. They weren't the greatest. Like the only really shiny one is this silver one, to be honest with you. So I hope that gave you some sort of description on it. It's a nice palette. I like it. I don't think it's a bad palette at all, but I was hoping for a little more. These next 2 are interchangeable. I had a really hard time deciding which one I liked more than the other. And to be honest, I pretty much like these equally. So I'm just like closing my eyes and like just pointing at one of them basically to put them in these 2 spots. So coming in at number 6, I have the Wicked Widow Beauty Scissorhands 2 palette. I think they did an amazing job with this. I love this palette. First of all, the color story, again, I think is so pleasing to the eye. Are these tones I'm gonna reach for all the time? No, they're not. But I think they did a gorgeous job curating this color story. I think it looks beautiful. Again, when I saw the pictures of this, I was so excited to pick it up. I did receive this in PR, by the way, but I would have bought it myself. I was interested. I think the matte shadows are really good. They're not my favorite mattes ever, but I think they're really, really good. They're not hard to work with. The only one I had a little trouble working with was this one, Mansion, this purple shade. But other than that, no issues at all. I love these 2 mattes, like these grungier, more neutral leaning mattes. But the thing that steals the show with this palette are the shimmers. They are just next level. Super shiny, super sparkly, super creamy. Some of them are even like multi-chromes. Beautiful shimmers. And this one, the Bogs, I love it. Looking at it in the pan, it's white. But when you swatch it on your finger, it goes from pink to blue. Like I wore it in my inner corner the other day and it straight up looked like it was a blue eyeshadow, and it's not. It's not. It's so beautifully shifty, just beautiful. I can't even stress that enough. So my only thing with this is I wish that some of these metallics were lighter. There's a lot of dark metallics and it's just not in my preference. I'm not saying it's a bad palette. I'm not saying anything like that, but I prefer to have light to mid-tone shimmers. I don't often wear dark shimmers. I just don't prefer them. So a lot of these shimmers lean very dark. And so I wish some of them were more light to mid-tone. That's kind of my only complaint about this. Otherwise, gorgeous palette. Coming in at number 5, I have the Blend Bunny Lure palette. Kind of, again, that same pink, blue, green, purple type of color story. I think it's beautiful. Again, this is neck and neck with the Wicked Widow Beauty palette, but I did pick this one just because I am more of a matte girl. Like if I'm going to categorize myself a matte girl or a shimmer girl, I'm a matte girl. What about you? What are you? Let me know. When it's a matte heavy palette and they're Blend Bunny mattes, sign me up. Quality of this is just the usual great Blend Bunny quality. Pigmented, but blendable. Easy to use. They show up true to pan. The pastels in this pastel row, she's not playing around. Super pigmented. And the shimmers in this are really beautiful. They remind me a lot of the All Done Up palette where they're really sparkly, really shiny, a little messy, so you want to be careful. But this shade Pearl, the multi-chrome, makes the palette for me. Makes the palette for me. I don't know if I'm going to capture it on here, but hopefully you'll see it in the swatches. I wore that shade all over my lid and I wore just this row I think it was the first look I did. Yeah, the first look I did with my 2 looks video, which I'll link down below. If I have any corresponding videos to these palettes, I'll put them down below. I wore this column and I got so many compliments on my makeup that day, like out and about in public. It's just very eye-catching, that multi-chrome pearl. The only reason this is going up again, up towards the, I guess, middle to end of the countdown is just this color story is not one that I'm gonna reach for a lot. It's not my ultimate favorite color story, but other than that, quality is top notch. Coming in at number 4, I have what I'm wearing on my eyes today, the Nomad Verona palette. I love Nomad as a brand. I think they do an amazing job. Every time they come out with a palette, they really put a lot of thought into it. It's a whole experience when you open it up. And they are an indie brand that does palettes based on destinations around the world. So they travel around the world and then they curate color stories and palettes based on those destinations. So this one is supposed to be Verona, Love, and Death. So it's got a love side here, so you can just open this to get that red, pink, Valentine's love color story. And then you have the death side, which is more dark and smoky. I'm wearing this side on my eyes today. Or you can mix and match both. So I think the packaging is fun. It is a little cumbersome to hold on camera, but not a big deal if you're not a YouTuber, like you can just put it down on your desk. So I like the packaging. I think it's really fun. I love Nomad's mattes. I think they do such an amazing job with their matte formula. I feel like their matte formula is pretty consistent overall through all their palettes. Their shimmers, I feel like, tend to change from palette to palette. I feel like they do change up their shimmer formula quite a lot. I think the shimmer formula in this is pretty. It's not my favorite shimmer formula that they've done, but I think it's pretty. Very sparkly on the lids. This side here, these 3 shimmers, I feel like are pretty dry, but they have a lot of reflect and a lot of sparkle to them. Kind of like the Santa's Village, but a little bit more of a base color to them. They're really, really pretty. On this side, I'm wearing on my eyes Juliet on the kind of outer half of my lid and Moors on the inner half of my lid. And Moors is more textured, a little bit flakier, but definitely really like boom in your face. Juliet is a little bit more, I don't want to say satiny, but it's not as textured. It's a little smoother, but still has that little sparkle to it. And then Tragedy, this is my favorite shimmer of them all. It is a shifty shade. It's so beautiful. I did use it in my second look in my 2 looks video that I did with this. But I will say the mattes are just spectacular. No complaints at all. Just the shimmers are not my favorite shimmers that they've done, but they're still really good. And if you like that more toppery, a little bit more sparkly look to your shimmers, you would like this one. Now, they did release something on Instagram the other day that I saw that said they feel like some of the palettes may have had shimmers that are pressed too hard because they've had, some people say that they're a little bit harder to work with. So I don't know if I got one of those ones where the shimmers are hard pressed, because they are very hard pressed, apart from the one down here, Tragedy. This one I don't feel like is hard pressed. The rest of them are hard pressed. So it could just be mine. I'm not gonna, get replacement shades. I like the palette as it is. I don't think they're impossible to work with or anything like that, but just keep that in mind. Maybe yours isn't the same as mine, or maybe it is. I don't know. I don't know. All that to say, I like this palette. It's coming in at number 4. Coming in at number 3. I wasn't gonna pick this palette up, and I didn't pick it up on launch. I picked it up on Black Friday after it went on sale for like dirt cheap. And I was like, fine. How can I say no? And I'm really glad I didn't say no. This is the Glam Light and Strawberry Shortcake Berrylicious palette. Actually, I'm remembering something else I wanted to say about Nomad that I'm gonna say about this as well, which I'll get to in a second. So quality of both the mattes and shimmers, so good. These mattes are insanely pigmented. It actually not really beginner friendly. You have to be a little bit careful when you're blending them, but I will say they're beautiful. They look like they do in the pan. Super pigmented, super beautiful, super wonderful. Shimmers, so good. Sparkly, but creamy. A lot of them are shifty. They have different shifts to them. So they're not all the same. You might say, oh, we don't need 3 green shimmers. They're not all green. They're not all the same. You have like a dark, deep hunter green. You have a blue to green. You have a bronze to green. So they're all different. Even though they may look at first glance like they're the same, they're not. I have nothing to say about the shimmers. They're beautiful. The only thing I would change about this, and kind of how I feel about the love side on the Nomad palette, is how am I gonna do this?
A few moments later.
I do wish with the red and pink mattes that there was a little more variety, because I found with both of these, when I did use 2, 3, 4 of the red shades, I'm talking the mattes, on my eye, they kind of all blended together and looked kind of the same, you know? So I don't know if it's really the best idea to use a bunch of the red mattes at the same time. Also, maybe I would suggest starting with the darkest shade and going lighter. I don't ever do that. I don't know. I've tried to do that and I have a hard time doing it. Maybe it's just because I'm not used to it. I always go light to deep, but I feel like it might benefit to do like your deepest color and then just blend out the edges with a lighter color. Because I found when I built the darks on top of the light shades, they kind of all became one and looked like one color. Does that make sense? It wasn't easy to get a gradient is kind of what I mean. Now the green shades in this is what really makes this palette for me. I love this middle row. I love it. I love it. I think if this middle row wasn't there, I don't know that I would love this palette as much as I do. I got a really beautiful green look and I wore it in a video and I got a lot of compliments. A lot of compliments. I was super happy with my makeup that day. So I think performance-wise, so good, both the mattes and the shimmers. I just wish there was a little bit more variety. Like I wish there was one really light matte, like almost like a pastel pink, and maybe one very deep matte. They're a little bit too mid-tone for me, but really good palette. All right, coming in at number 2, I have the Sugar Drizzle Hypernova palette. This is the first palette I've ever tried from Sugar Drizzle, and I did pick it up on Black Friday. This was released on Black Friday, and it was for $27, which is so good. If it is still available, of course, I will link it down below. I had such a good time with this palette. I think it's so beautiful. Now, Sugar Drizzle is known for their multi-chrome shadows. None of the shimmers in here are multi-chromes. They're all just straight up shimmers. But I found this shimmer formula to be very different than any other shimmer formula I've used. They're smooth, they're not messy, but they're very sparkly, really dimensional without being textured. And I love that because I have aging eyes and anything that's gonna like smooth them out is nice, but also give me that sparkle and give me that dimension. I love the color story on this. You've got neutrals, you've got color. I can't ask for more. Now, well, I can't ask for more. Of course I can. It's not at number 1. The only thing I would change about this, I wish there were more mattes because there's a lot of shimmers and I just prefer a matte heavy palette. I wish it was a very deep matte in here or maybe like a deep purple would be really pretty. And then my other complaint is this lime green matte here called Mega Nova was not super pigmented. It did require a lot of building, but it is a neon-ish shade, so I can kind of forgive it, but I think this palette is spectacular. I do have one of their other palettes I haven't used yet that has their multi-chrome shades, so I'm very excited to try them out, but I think this is a really good quality palette, and I do really like the color story, a great first experience with the brand. Coming in at number 1, can I get a drum roll, please? If you do not want to see the palette that was in the Unearthly Cosmetics Valentine's Day palette, I will say goodbye to you here. Thank you so much for watching. I appreciate it. Give it a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, because that is my number 1 palette that I've tried recently. It is the Surrender palette from Unearthly Cosmetics. The thing that got me is the color story. When I first opened the palette and I looked at this color story, I was like, yes, yes. To me, this is a beautiful Valentine's Day palette because it's not all pinks and reds, because I don't want to wear pinks and reds all the time, but it is festive enough that they've got these pops of pink and red, but you still have neutral tones. You have purple. You have these really light shimmers that are just beautiful. 2 of the shades are duochromes. Seductive is a reddish pink to a bronze, and then Alluring is a pink to a white gold. Mattes, really good quality, blendable yet pigmented. The shimmers are really beautiful. This has different textures with the metallics, but they did it right. They have more like smooth traditional metallics, and then they have more textured sparkly metallics. So they're giving different options of whatever you may be feeling that day, but they do them with good quality. I love this palette. I think it's so wonderful. You unfortunately cannot buy this on its own. It was only available in the box and the box has now sold out. So I'm so sorry if you did not pick it up and you want it. But, you know, I don't think this is a completely unique color story. I think you can dupe out some of these shades in your collection already. But I will say, I think this is such a beautiful Valentine's Day palette done the right way. I do have a code with Unearthly Cosmetics. It is just Rachel. It does save you 10% off your purchase, and it is affiliated, so if you do use it, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Like I said, you can't buy this anymore, but I will link their site down below if you want to check them out. And I'm sorry, I also forgot to say that I did receive the Verona palette in PR as well. All the other palettes except for the Verona and the Scissor Hands palettes, I did purchase on my own. All right, and that is it for this palette ranking video. I hope you enjoyed it. Leave me a comment down below letting me know if you agree with my rankings. Have you tried these palettes? Any of these palettes? Let me know your thoughts on them if you did. Let me know about a palette if I didn't mention one or if I didn't try it. Is there a palette you tried recently that you are loving? Let me know down in the comments. I love hearing from you. And if you did enjoy this video, please give it a thumbs up. That helps me out a lot when you do that. And if you're not already subscribed to my channel, I would love it if you would consider subscribing before you leave. I do upload videos weekly, both beauty and fashion videos, and I would love to see you back on my channel again. I want to thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye.